538 has just released their national and state-specific polling averages, and Donald Trump is performing significantly better than we initially thought. According to their national average, Trump has been ahead throughout the entirety of the 2024 electoral cycle. On top of that, Joe Biden is more unpopular than ever, and Donald Trump's popularity has risen since he left office back in 2021. And so in this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map based on 538's new polling averages in every single state. Starting off with the West Coast, we don't actually have polling averages in Washington or Oregon yet, but we do have numbers from basically every single competitive state, as well as some of the largest states like California. According to 538's new average, Joe Biden leads by 20.2% in the Golden State. This may seem like a pretty impressive margin, but if you look back at 2016 or 2020, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton won the state by 30 points. Biden performing significantly worse than he did last time in the most populated state in the country. I mean, California has a population of 40 million. This 10% drop really is very significant, and it's going to hurt Biden in the popular vote. And we can also see that Robert F. Kennedy has been included in these polling averages as he continues to poll about 10% consistently. And so California is still going to be solid for Biden, but definitely not as much as he would have wanted it to be. Moving on to our first competitive state, we have Nevada. This is a state that Biden won in 2020 by 2.4%. A loss here for the incumbent president would spell a pretty bad sign for his re-election, as every single Democrat has won the state going all the way back to 2008. The last Republican to win in the Silver State was George W. Bush 20 years ago. And if Donald Trump flips Nevada, he is in a very good position to re-secure the presidency. And so according to 538's average, Donald Trump leads by 6 percentage points. It isn't even close. If you look at the polling throughout the entirety of the election cycle, Trump has consistently been ahead. Kennedy's polling in at 11%, and Joe Biden isn't even at 40% of the vote share in a state he won in the last election. If you look at the polling average here from 2020, you really see just how much Biden has fallen. In 2020, Biden led by 5.3% in the end and was consistently ahead throughout the entirety of the election cycle. And today, we see nearly the exact opposite happening with Donald Trump leading by a pretty significant margin. And so according to 538's average here in Nevada, the state is going to be likely Republican. It isn't even going to be that competitive. Next up in Arizona, this is a state that Trump really has to win, not because 11 electoral votes is really that much, but because if Trump doesn't win in Arizona, he's probably not going to perform well enough in other states for him to get over 270. And so in Arizona, this is a state that hasn't voted for a Democrat since 1996, before Joe Biden won it in 2020. The last Democrat before Biden to win Arizona was Bill Clinton when he won his re-election. And so looking at 2024, it seems pretty obvious that Trump is going to win back a state that Biden barely won, especially considering just how far Biden's popularity has fallen since he was originally elected 4 years ago. And so 538's average currently puts Trump ahead by 3.7%. So I think it's actually pretty surprising that Trump is performing better in Nevada, a state that he never won, than he is in Arizona, a state that's been pretty Republican over the last 2 decades. Barack Obama in his 2 elections didn't even really come close to winning the state at all in 2012 and 2008. And so looking at 2024, Arizona is going to be a lean Republican state. And what I can tell you right now is that Trump is performing better in nearly every other battleground state when compared to Arizona. So this is honestly one of his worst performances if you look at the other battleground states that we're going to cover later on in this video. Before we continue, only 8% of you guys are subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe. So we're going to place it in the lean Republican column for now until we really get some more data from the region. Kansas, Oklahoma will be solid red as well, while Colorado and New Mexico are likely Democratic states. There have actually been quite a few polls from these states, but just not enough for 538 to create a polling average. But when it comes out, Biden's going to be leading in that 6 to 8% range in these 2 states. Alaska and Hawaii, same thing. We don't have too much data from it, but Hawaii is going to be solid blue, while Alaska will be solid red. And so moving on to Texas, 40 electoral votes, the second largest state in the country, and on
Вон он, сука! Вон он! Вон он, сука! Вон он, блядь, вон он! Блядь, тут нашего завалили!
Эй, земляк, мы стрелять не хотим, мы так...
Служивый на! Да вон он! Вот он!
Ублюдок, мать твою, а ну иди сюда, говно собачье! Решил ко мне лезть? Ты, засранец вонючий, мать твою, а? Ну иди сюда, попробуй меня!
Блядь, тут нашего завалили! Короче, купят тебя, служивый! Ай, козы! Съели меня, да! Сука! Сука! Что?
track to overtaking California sometime in the next few decades in terms of population. This is a state that's supposed to be shifting to the left. We saw a close Senate race in 2018 when Ted Cruz almost lost to Beto O'Rourke, and generally Donald Trump hasn't been the best performer in Texas. In 2012, Mitt Romney won the Lone Star State by 16 points. That margin fell to 9% in 2016, and most recently in 2020, Trump actually only won Texas by just over 5%. However, in 2024, Trump has rebounded and currently leads by 10.3% in Texas. Now, this may not seem like the biggest margin. It's still worse than Mitt Romney's. However, if you look at the 2020 polling, we see that Trump is performing significantly better than he was last time, and the polls severely underestimated him in the last election. He won it pretty easily, despite the polling at some point seeing that Biden was actually supposed to win Texas, when that was always very unrealistic. Texas is going to remain a real red state, at least for the foreseeable future, and Donald Trump is going to help make sure that happens, as it is currently likely for the former president. Moving on to the Midwest, we have a lot of really important races here. I'm going to start off by filling in Minnesota and Iowa. We just don't have enough polling there to create a polling average yet, but in Minnesota, basically every single poll is showing Biden ahead by 2 to 3%, so it's going to be a lean state. It's going to be competitive, while Iowa is not. Iowa has proven itself to be a solid red state. It re-elected its Republican governor Kim Reynolds by a 20-point margin, and Donald Trump easily won the state in the last 2 elections. So going into 2024, Iowa really isn't going to be close. Indiana won't be close either, and Joe Biden is doing pretty well in Illinois, so that's going to make it solid blue. Now, we do have polling from these states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We have enough polling in those 4 states at 530 has made a polling average for them. So starting off in Wisconsin, now these 3 upper Rust Belt states are going to be the most important states. Who wins states like Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, it's really not going to matter as much, because if Trump can win these states, he's probably going to need to win the 3 upper Rust Belt states as well. And for Biden, if he can win Arizona and Georgia, he's probably going to have won the election anyways. So really, it's going to converge upon Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. It's these 3 states that are going to get either candidate over 270 electoral votes. That's what happened in the last 2 elections. And so starting off in Wisconsin, Trump leads by a 2.8% margin. This seems pretty impressive. Kennedy's at 10%. But what you have to consider is how wrong the polls have been in Wisconsin in the last few election cycles. If you go back and look at the 2020 polling, Joe Biden was supposed to win the state of Wisconsin by 8.4% in the last election. Ultimately, he won the state by 0.63%. And so now, just the fact that Trump is even leading just goes to show you how much better he is on track performing in this election compared to the last. So Wisconsin is going to be a lean Republican state, but when comparing it to the 2020 numbers, he really is in a very comfortable position. Michigan is going to be important as well. Joe Biden probably isn't going to be able to win the election without Michigan, because if Michigan goes red, states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona are nearly guaranteed to do the same. Michigan is probably the most liberal right now out of all the battleground states. Gretchen Whitmer won her re-election as a Democratic governor pretty easily in 2022. However, we did see Trump win the state of Michigan in 2016. He became the first Republican to win the state in nearly 3 decades. He did the same thing in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in that election. In 2020, Joe Biden was narrowly able to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin back, but considering how much less popular he is now, it is going to be very, very difficult. According to 538 polling average in the Wolverine state, Donald Trump leads by 2% over Joe Biden, and Biden at no point has ever been ahead in the state. And just like Wisconsin, Michigan polls have really underestimated Trump's support. If you look at the 2020 polling here, Biden was supposed to win by 8%. It wasn't even close to that. Biden won by less than 3%. And so once again, Trump's lead really spells out just how well he is doing in this state, just like Wisconsin, when you compare it to the last election, and that's why he is currently so favored to win the election. So Michigan is also going to be lean Republican, just like Wisconsin, just like Arizona, all states that Trump was unable to win in 2020. Next up in Ohio, we have a state that used to be the bellwether state. Ohio basically voted for whoever won in the presidential election for nearly 6 decades. I mean, if you go back to the elections of 2000 and 2004, you see the state nearly went to George W. Bush, and then it flipped over to Obama in 2008. But then when Trump won in 2016, he won the state of Ohio by a pretty significant margin. Many polls showed that Biden was supposed to win back the state in 2020, but he didn't even come close. So Ohio is no longer a battleground state. Tim Ryan couldn't even get elected over J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance honestly wasn't the best Senate candidate. So Ohio now has another Republican senator, and the state really isn't going to go back anytime soon. So Ohio is pretty rad, and we can see that from the polling average. Trump easily leads over Biden. And again, I just want to show you guys what we saw in 2020. The state was supposed to be very, very competitive. Not until just a few days before the election was Trump actually favored in the state. However, now it's not even close. It is going to be a Trump state, and honestly, he's probably going to win it by over 12 points. Ohio is probably going to be solid, but according to just the numbers alone, it is currently going to be placed in the likely Republican column. And to finish off the Rust Belt with Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, this is Biden's birth state, and Joe Biden really has to win Pennsylvania if he wants to win the election, just because of how many electoral votes it has, and without it, he's simply not going to be able to get to 270. That's simply how the math works out. And so Biden might have won the state by 1.2% in 2020, but looking ahead to 2024, he's behind by 1.6%. Trump is doing pretty well, and he definitely is on track to winning the state, just like the other two. Now, the polling hasn't been as inaccurate in Pennsylvania like it was in Michigan or Wisconsin, but Trump was still definitely underestimated, and him being ahead here is a very good sign for the Trump campaign. Joe Biden really needs to make ground in this Rust Belt region if he wants to have any chance at winning his re-election. And so in the Rust Belt, we saw that back in 2020, a lot of it was blue. Now we only have Illinois, which has Chicago, and Minnesota, which is barely even a blue state anymore. So the Rust Belt is slowly shifting more and more to the right, especially in the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which were very reliable blue states back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Up in the Northeast, we don't really have too much polling from this region. We're just going to fill it in like how it's probably going to look. It is generally a pretty blue region, although the biggest surprise here is that Donald Trump is on track to winning Maine according to the last two polls released, and we really only have had two polls from the state so far in this cycle. I'm not going to be too exact with the margins, but it's basically all going to be pretty blue, even though Biden's probably not going to win by that much in both New York and New Jersey. Just for the sake of this map, we're just going to place it into solid Democratic category, because Trump really is on track to winning those states, even if he does perform better than usual. The rest of the South is basically all going to be completely dark red, while in Virginia, we're seeing something similar happen here like we are in Minnesota. The state is not as blue as it was in the last cycle. We have some polls that suggest that already, with Joe Biden leading by less than 5% in basically every single survey released from the state. And so we have three states left: North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Starting off with North Carolina, this was a very competitive state in 2020. Most people believe that Joe Biden was going to win Cargill State, but in the end, Donald Trump came out on top. He won North Carolina by 1.3%, and according to the latest polling, Trump is going to win it by 5.6% in 2024. It's not even going to be close. Donald Trump is going to win North Carolina. Joe Biden is very unlikely to perform better this year than he did in the last election. So North Carolina is essentially impossible for Biden to win, especially considering in 2020, Biden led North Carolina throughout the entirety of the election cycle. That isn't the case anymore. In 2024, North Carolina is a likely Republican state. Trump is performing pretty well in Georgia as well. According to 538 polling average, Trump leads by 6.6%. Kennedy isn't really doing too well here either. In many of these southern states, we're seeing a lot less of an influence from RFK Jr. He's really getting most of his votes from the Northeast, somewhat from the Midwest and the West Coast. The more liberal Democratic areas are generally going to be more favorable for RFK. However, in Georgia, we're seeing a state that barely voted for Biden in the last election, but now is going to easily go to Donald Trump, who is much more popular than he was when he ran 4 years ago. He's no longer the incumbent president, and Joe Biden, who is in office, has just slowly seen his popularity continue to decline the longer he's been in office. And so Georgia is going to flip back to being red, and it's just as Republican as North Carolina. And finally, in Georgia, this is the last state that we have to fill in. Donald Trump leads by 10.4%. This is really not normal. We have not seen Florida be so solid for either one party in decades. The last time that a Republican won the state of Florida by a double-digit margin was all the way back in 1998. It's been nearly over 3 decades, since any candidate has performed terribly well in the Sunshine State. And so in Florida, 2024, Donald Trump is going to be the first candidate to really win the state by a significant margin in 2 whole generations. So Florida is going to be likely Republican, although it's very possible that the state does vote for Trump by over 12 points. And so this is the 2024 electoral map based on 538's newly released polling averages. States like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania all expect to go red, while Trump is dominating in states like North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Nevada. Many of these states were won by Biden in the last election. And so Trump continues to be in a very strong position, and 538's new polling averages only reinforce that fact.
So the Supreme Court just issued a 9-0 unanimous decision, and that decision creates some concerns about future challenges to states when they pass unconstitutional rifle and magazine bans. So let's talk about what just happened. But real quick before we jump into this video, I want to mention that about 60% of all my viewers on the channel are actually not subscribed to the channel. So if you guys want to support this content, if you want this type of information to get out to more people, provisions that are included in those laws. The case we're going to be talking about in this video is the Villiers versus the state of Texas lawsuit. This case involves when individuals can sue a state directly because of an unconstitutional taking in violation of the Fifth Amendment's taking clause. The taking clause is something that we see pop up quite a bit in 2A cases, specifically when cases involve challenges to statewide rifle and magazine bans. Oftentimes, those state laws have confiscation provisions that are challenged essentially as unconstitutional because of a taking by the government and a taking without just compensation. Now, they're also often challenged under Second Amendment grounds, but takings clause is another thing that is often tacked on to those lawsuits. We have seen in cases like the Duncan, California magazine ban case that courts dismissed those claims because they believe they're invalid. This case essentially sought clarification from the Supreme Court on whether the takings clause in the Fifth Amendment is self-executing to the point where individuals did not need express congressional authorization to sue a state in federal courts. In this case, the Supreme Court avoided that issue once again, and it creates a lot of issues and some potential fallout going forward in other cases, including 2A cases, when the takings clause is brought up. Now, I need to give you guys some context and some background on what this case involves so you understand what is implicated and what could happen going forward. This case arises out of the state of Texas installing a roughly 3-foot tall barrier along a highway median, essentially to act as a dam and prevent stormwater from covering specific areas of that road, and that was in the Houston area. In August of 2017, Hurricane Harvey brought heavy rainfall in that area, and that new median barrier that was put in place by the state of Texas essentially performed as intended.
Hey guys,
but then as a result, it flooded the petitioners and the plaintiffs in this case's land in a northbound area of Houston, and essentially it flooded their homes, damaged some of their businesses, ruined their crops, killed some of their livestock, and then just generally damaged some of the property where the water was flooded into. The same thing happened during a tropical storm back in 2019, and in response, 120 individuals impacted by that barrier that was put in place sued the state of Texas. Now, de Villiers, he was one of the plaintiffs, he's the named plaintiff in this lawsuit in the consolidated lawsuits, and they filed a lawsuit in the state of Texas court. So this was originally brought in a state of Texas court. He alleged that by building that median barrier and then using his property as a kind of overflow area, the state of Texas had affected a taking of his property. Now, de Villiers argued that he was therefore entitled to just compensation under both the United States and the state of Texas constitutions, pointing there to the taking takings clause both in the U.S. Constitution and then under the state of Texas Constitution as well. And in result, the state of Texas itself, who's the defendant, filed a motion to remove that case from the state courtroom to a federal courtroom, and that's exactly what happened. But once the case was removed from the state court to the federal court, well, then the state of Texas argued that the case needed to be dismissed because there was no valid takings clause argument, that the takings clause did not allow these plaintiffs to sue the state of Texas in a federal courtroom. The state of Texas contended that only certain federal statutes provide a vehicle to essentially assert constitutional violations, and that those do not authorize claims directly against the state of Texas. Now, the plaintiffs there did not dispute that they intended to bring the federal lawsuit and the claim directly under the Fifth Amendment. Instead, him and the other plaintiffs responded that the takings clause is self-executing, which he argued means that the takings clause itself provides a cause of action for just compensation against a state like Texas. Now, on review, the federal district court denied the state of Texas' motion to dismiss the case and to dismiss the takings clause arguments that were brought. The court found that a property owner, like the plaintiffs here, may sue a state like Texas directly under the takings clause, that it was in some ways self-operating. Essentially, think of it this way. The state of Texas built a barrier and it resulted in flooding and damage of the plaintiff's property. So they sued the state of Texas in a state courtroom. Well, the state of Texas then decided to get the case moved from a state court to a federal court. Then ultimately what they argued is that the lawsuit could not move forward because now suddenly it was in a federal courtroom and the takings clause was not valid for this type of lawsuit in a federal courtroom. The state of Texas claimed that the takings clause is not self-executing and as a result does not permit the property owners to bring a case in federal courts even in absence of a specific federal statute authorizing a lawsuit. But in the lower court, the state of Texas lost, but then the state of Texas appealed up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And in a one-paragraph opinion, the Fifth Circuit held that the Fifth Amendment takings clause as applied to the states through the 14th Amendment does not provide a right of action for takings claims against a state. That means that the Fifth Circuit believed that the takings clause is not self-executing and that a state like Texas could not be sued in federal court for a takings essentially outside of express congressional authorization or unless Congress expressly includes in a statute some sort of cause of action. That, of course, is absurd, and the plaintiffs immediately filed for Supreme Court review. The Supreme Court then granted review to the case and recently issued a 9-0 unanimous decision which vacated that Fifth Circuit decision and remanded the case back down to the lower court for reconsideration in light of what they said. However, the decision by the Supreme Court avoided the big question in the case and ultimately opens the door for even more issues and concerns going forward when it comes to the takings clause. The Supreme Court punted on addressing the issue of whether the takings clause is in fact self-executing to the point where plaintiffs can bring direct federal lawsuits against a state because of an unconstitutional taking without just compensation. In the decision, the court stated that our precedents do not cleanly answer the question whether a plaintiff has a cause of action arising directly under the takings clause. But this case does not require us to resolve that question. The question presented asks, what would happen if a property owner had no cause of action to vindicate his right under the takings clause? It would be imprudent to decide that question without satisfying ourselves of the premise that there is no cause of action. The premise that Texas left de Villiers and the other plaintiffs with no cause of action to obtain the just compensation guaranteed by the takings clause does not hold. Texas state law provides a cause of action by which property owners may seek just compensation against the state of Texas. As Texas explained at oral argument, its state law, inverse condemnation cause of action, provides a vehicle for takings claims based on both the Texas Constitution and the takings clause. And although Texas asserted that proceeding under the state law, cause of action would require an amendment to the complaint, it also assured the court that it would not oppose any attempt by the plaintiffs and the other petitioners to seek one. This case, therefore, does not present the circumstances in which a property owner has no cause of action to seek just compensation. On remand, de Villiers and the other property owners should be permitted to pursue their claims under the takings clause through the cause of action available under the Texas laws. Now, ultimately, what this means is the Supreme Court did overturn the clearly incorrect Fifth Circuit ruling, which dismissed the plaintiffs' takings claims and dismissed that case. That also means that the Supreme Court nullified the state of Texas' attempt to get rid of this case by simply moving it from a state court to a federal court. But there are still a ton of questions going forward with this case and other cases. Can the plaintiffs proceed forward in federal court with a state cause of action, or does it have to go back to the state of Texas court? And if it does go back to a state court, what then prevents the state of Texas from once again asking for the case to be removed from the state court, send it back to the federal court, and then just do a whole merry-go-round system where constantly they're getting this case dismissed, and there's a lot of questions continue to be brought up, and this question about self-executing takings clause never actually being answered. Now, you may be asking, how does this impact the Second Amendment in two-way cases? Well, plenty of times, rifle and magazine bans include challenges to state laws under the concept that there is an unconstitutional taking and that there was never any just compensation. Most of the major two-way cases are often filed in federal courts. They're filed in federal courts because of Second Amendment violations, but also sometimes takings clause issues are raised as well. For example, the Duncan, California magazine ban case had both a two-way claim and then a takings clause claim. The takings clause often is related to the confiscation or the forced destruction of those items without any compensation by the government. But because of this case and this decision and the unclear status of self-executing takings clause.
What's up?
I left that Pride and Prejudice on because that movie can make any kid fall asleep.
Just put it on repeat.
Clause, states like California and others can continue to argue that these claims should be dismissed. When it comes to takings clause and these types of claims in two-way cases, it's already kind of been a hard argument to win. Sometimes district courts will rule in your favor, but oftentimes these forced confiscations and forced destructions of firearms and items, oftentimes the courts don't believe that's enough to actually warrant compensation by the government or to find a violation of the takings clause. Sometimes they'll say, well, you had other avenues to you could modify, you could register, do all these other things, and therefore there was no takings clause violation. So it's already been an uphill battle when it comes to these types of arguments, but then you add this on top with the procedural aspect, and it makes it procedurally even harder going forward. So really an interesting case, and it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below, and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and you like to support the channel, one of the best ways to
here with another Helldivers 2 update. Things are looking bleak with the current major order. Arrowhead CEO has been giving out big piece of information in the last 24 hours, and I'm here to tell you about it all. But first, it's time for a brand new war bond. That new war bond is Polar Patriots, and it is now available for purchase with 1,000 super credits. And now that it is purchasable, there's some stuff in it that we can actually fully preview for the first time. We discussed in the video going over the trailer for this war bond, saying that it wasn't clear if the Helldiver animations that were coming were emotes or victory poses or both. Well, just like the other war bonds since the original, they are just victory poses, which I must admit is kind of unfortunate. Emotes are so cool and also desperately needed, so we'll just have to wait for now. I do like the victory poses.
More gumbo, or do you want like chicken patties or?
What do you want?
You don't want gumbo, then pack it up.
I guess I could just do chicken patties. Just
Yeah, your acid reflux too.
Yeah.
Agitated again. Can you do me a favor though?
what's up?
Trim my hair.
Why?
Just a little bit at the bottom, like this much.
It
My
does.
hands are just dry.
It doesn't need it. It doesn't need. Babe, no one's laughing at you while you're walking. And of course it's wet, so it's all sticking together too. I think it's fine. You always want your hair to get longer and then you like cut it off an inch at a time. Huh? Yeah. I'm just doing some practice ones to make sure that the software is working correctly. What I can't seem to figure out though is how to separate my audio sources, because right now it's picking up absolutely everything. So I need to figure out how to make it so it... Yeah. No one's watching. But I need to figure out like how to make it so it'll only pick up the game audio. And I still want to be able to do like open mic on it, but I don't know. It's just stuff I need to sort out before I start like trying to actually make it a viable thing. Just experimenting. I don't know if anyone else is gonna do it, but just about what? Yeah, it's fine. I know. No, that's not that guy that I need to kill. Really don't need to worry as hard as you are. water's wet, so it's clumping together, so you don't see as much volume as you would.
This tag is like so short. That worked.
Ага.
Okay.
Though, like mime instrumentation, to show off your democratic physical ability. This is called a Helldivers, which is more like a Helldiver to indicate a fellow freedom fighter digits. Right away, that's it. And in the last victory pose, you can make it rain with distribute balance. I like them all, but I don't see why they're only victory poses. If these were also emotes, it would be so much cooler to do these kind of things on the battlefield. Outside of that, the Warbond is basically what was promised in the trailer, and 300 super credits, as always, will also be included. Later on today, Swanee should have a video going through all the weapons and the grenades, the pistol, and how to use them and how good that they are. That entire analytic style video will be available for you later on today. Next up, let's talk about the Major Order. The Major Order is not progressing nicely for the Helldivers. Angel's Venture was recently completed, but every 24 hours ago, we are not on pace to make it in time. The weekend won't be able to help us either, as this will finish before then. Bell right now sits at less than half. Have yet to see any progress. I guess with all the chaos of this past week, the fight hasn't been quite satisfactory, and that's for this Major Order. As I said before, I do believe filling this Major Order could be catastrophic for Super Earth, because I believe this might be our last chance to stop the spread of the Termicide before it's on Super Earth's doorstep. This, of course, might not be entirely a bad thing, because it would be super fun to play on Super Earth. So a sick, undemocratic part of me really hopes this happens. There is still time, though, if a significant enough push comes from the playbase. We could still finish the Major Order and capture the 40 medals that comes with its completion. The new personal order for the day is to defeat 35 warriors. If you're unsure of what that is, this picture should help you find them. Warriors are everywhere, all the time, on so many planets, so this shouldn't take you long to complete at all. Almost any gun works on these. There's also an exciting new update to the Superstore because there are 2 brand new armors that can be purchased through Super Credits. The first is the medium armor of the CW9 White Wolf. This armor looks a little like heavy armor, and in a way it kind of is heavy armor because its perk is having a heavy armor rating. As for the look, I'm not crazy about the color, but the design I really like a lot. The other armor is the CE64 Grenadier, and I am a big fan of this armor. This might be the coolest looking heavy armor I've seen. I love the stripes and markings on the armor and helmet, which gives it a bit of a jungle hunter feel, and the color scheme works a little bit better here. Its perk goes along with its name, Grenadier, as you can hold more grenades in this armor. The CEO of Arrowhead, Paustet, has been very active in the last 24 hours, posting all kinds of responses to questions and comments on both Twitter and Discord. The Discord activity is particularly rare since he hasn't posted on there in nearly 3 months. Apparently he was so inactive on Discord, he did not even have permission to post on the player poll section on the page. However, he did post a major poll on Twitter instead. So the poll said to all the Helldivers 2 out there with the negative sentiment around
Hello. You there? Hello? You there?